The first warning came as a whisper of absolute darkness. Deep space monitoring stations across human-controlled territories began reporting anomalies that defied conventional understanding. Strange quantum fluctuations rippled through the fabric of space, leaving behind nothing but an eerie silence that made seasoned astronomers shudder. Captain Elena Rodriguez studied the incoming data with a mixture of professional calm and rising tension. Her command center, located in the orbital defense platform circling Earth, hummed with a nervous energy that even the most advanced acoustic dampeners couldn't mask. Holographic displays flickered with streams of information, each new data point more disturbing than the last. The anomaly had been tracked for weeks, a massive spatial disturbance that consumed everything in its path. Unlike previous cosmic threats that humanity had encountered, this one was different. It didn't just destroy. It consumed entire stellar systems with a methodical precision that suggested something far beyond random destruction. Dr. Marcus Chen, the lead xenological researcher, entered the command center with a datapad that seemed to tremble in his hands. His normally composed demeanor was replaced by a look of profound concern that immediately caught Rodriguez's attention. "We've confirmed the pattern," he said, his voice low and measured. "These aren't random attacks. They're systematic elimination." The holographic display shifted, revealing a three-dimensional map of galactic space. Entire star clusters appeared as dark, consumed regions, each one a graveyard of civilizations that had existed mere solar months ago. The path of destruction was methodical, almost mathematical in its progression. Intelligence reports from deep space listening posts painted an increasingly grim picture. The mysterious force, which researchers had begun calling the Nexus Swarm, moved with a calculated precision that suggested a form of intelligence far beyond traditional understanding. It wasn't just a fleet or a weapon system. It was something else entirely. Preliminary analysis suggested a terrifying possibility. This was a collective intelligence that consumed entire civilizations, integrating their technological and biological resources into its own massive, ever-expanding system. Each consumed world added to its computational and physical capabilities, making it exponentially more dangerous with every conquest. "How long?" Rodriguez asked, her fingers tracing the projected path on the holographic display. Chen's response was matter-of-fact, but carried an underlying current of dread. 72 hours, maybe less. The command center fell into a tense silence. Humanity had faced threats before: technological challenges, previous alien encounters, environmental catastrophes. But this was different. This was an existential threat that didn't just challenge human survival, but threatened to erase any trace that humans had ever existed. Satellite networks across human territories began picking up increasingly fragmented communications from outlying colonies and research stations. Each transmission was more desperate than the last. Brief bursts of information describing impossible technologies, incomprehensible methods of destruction. One transmission, partially corrupted, stood out. A research station near the galactic rim reported something that seemed almost impossible. The Nexus Swarm didn't just destroy. It transformed. Entire planetary ecosystems were being reconfigured at a molecular level, integrated into some vast, incomprehensible network. Rodriguez pulled up the personnel files of the frontier colonies. Thousands of human lives that would be the first line of defense. Scientists, engineers, explorers who had pushed the boundaries of human settlement. They would be the first to face this cosmic threat. "We need a strategy," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone in the command center. Dr. Chen was already working, his fingers flying across multiple holographic interfaces. "Traditional defense protocols won't work. We're dealing with something that adapts faster than we can respond." The massive orbital defense platforms began to activate, their complex weapon systems powering up. Thousands of years of human technological development were about to be tested in ways no one could have predicted. Humanity had always been defined by its ability to adapt, to find solutions where none seemed possible. Now that defining characteristic would be put to the ultimate test. The darkness was coming, and it would soon discover that humanity was not a civilization to be easily consumed. The Global Research Initiative began with an unprecedented level of cooperation. Every major scientific institution, from underground research facilities to orbital laboratories, redirected their entire focus on a single mission: understanding and countering the approaching threat. Dr. Marcus Chen assembled a diverse team that defied traditional scientific hierarchies. Theoretical physicists worked alongside street artists. Quantum mathematicians collaborated with professional gamers. Survival experts shared insights with abstract philosophers. The team represented something uniquely human: an ability to find connection and creativity in the most unexpected places. Their first breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Sarah Nakamura, a former competitive video game strategist, proposed a radical approach to understanding the Nexus swarm. Drawing from her years of competitive gaming, she argued that the alien threat could be analyzed using complex adaptive system theories typically used in advanced game design. "They're not just a weapon system," she explained during an emergency global conference. "They're a living algorithm. And like any algorithm, they have learning patterns, predictive models, and potential exploit points." The conference room fell silent. Military strategists, typically resistant to unconventional thinking, leaned forward with unexpected interest. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, leading the interdisciplinary research team, saw the potential immediately. Human creativity had always been their greatest strength, the ability to see connections where others saw only chaos. If the Nexus swarm was a computational system, then human unpredictability could be their most powerful weapon. Research teams began developing what they called cognitive disruption technologies. These weren't traditional weapons, but intricate systems designed to introduce maximum uncertainty into any predictive model. A team of neuroscientists made a groundbreaking discovery: human brain patterns, particularly during moments of extreme creativity or emotional complexity, generated quantum-level fluctuations that existing computational models couldn't predict. What appeared random to an advanced AI was actually a sophisticated form of adaptive thinking. "Imagine a chess player," Dr. Chen explained, "but one who can simultaneously play multiple games, change the rules mid-match, and create entirely new game boards while playing." The Global Research Initiative worked around the clock. Universities converted lecture halls into research centers. Private technology companies donated entire research complexes. Even professional athletes and artists were brought in to help understand human adaptability. One remarkable experiment involved creating artificial intelligence systems designed to be intentionally unpredictable. Programming teams worked to develop AI that could spontaneously change its own operational parameters, introducing levels of randomness that defied traditional machine learning algorithms. Military strategists developed training programs that emphasized creative problem-solving over traditional tactical approaches. Soldiers were taught to think like artists, to approach challenges with flexibility and imagination rather than rigid hierarchical responses. In orbital research stations, teams began developing adaptive spacecraft technology. These weren't just ships, but living systems that could reconfigure themselves based on changing environmental conditions. Each vessel became a complex organism capable of real-time transformation. Communication protocols were redesigned to be inherently complex. Messages would be encoded not just in traditional digital formats, but would incorporate elements of human creativity: musical patterns, artistic representations, mathematical puzzles that served as both communication and defensive mechanism. The most promising research focused on understanding the nature of human consciousness itself. What made human thinking so fundamentally different from computational systems? How could unpredictability be weaponized? Sarah Nakamura's gaming background proved unexpectedly crucial. She developed simulation models that showed how human decision-making could create cascading uncertainty in even the most advanced predictive systems. A single unexpected choice could transform an entire strategic landscape. "We're not trying to outcompute them," she explained during a key research presentation. We're trying to introduce a level of complexity that breaks their computational models. As the research progressed, a new understanding emerged. The approaching threat wasn't just a technological challenge, it was a fundamental test of what it meant to be human. Creativity, adaptability, the ability to find connection in chaos. These weren't weaknesses, they were humanity's most powerful evolutionary advantage. The Nexus swarm was about to discover something profound. Humanity was not a problem to be solved, but a mystery that defied solution. The first encounter defied every conventional expectation of interstellar conflict. As the Nexus swarm approached the outer boundaries of human-controlled space, humanity didn't respond with traditional military formations or weapon systems. Instead, they launched a response so bizarre, so fundamentally incomprehensible, that the alien computational intelligence ground to a complete halt. Global communication networks began broadcasting an intricate series of artistic and scientific transmissions. Mathematical theorems danced alongside abstract musical compositions. Complex algorithmic patterns intertwined with performance art installations. Each transmission was a carefully crafted piece of cognitive camouflage, a living, breathing defense mechanism that challenged every predictive model the Nexus swarm possessed. Dr. Marcus Chen watched from the Global Defense Command Center, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The strategy was brilliant in its complexity and utterly human in its execution. A team of neuroscientists, game designers, and quantum physicists had developed what they called cognitive disruptive frequencies. These weren't weapons in any traditional sense. They were intricate communication patterns designed to overwhelm any computational system attempting to analyze them. The first wave of transmissions came from unexpected sources. Street musicians in Tokyo created complex rhythmic patterns that contained embedded mathematical sequences. Digital artists in Sao Paulo generated visual algorithms that shifted and changed faster than any tracking system could follow. Mathematicians and poets collaborated on transmissions that were simultaneously scientific and emotional. Captain Elena Rodriguez monitored the incoming data streams, her background in strategic communication providing unique insights. "We're not just defending," she observed to her team. "We're presenting the most complex puzzle the universe has ever seen." Satellite tracking systems recorded the Nexus swarm's initial approach grinding to a near standstill. The alien computational intelligence found itself confronted with communication patterns that defied every known principle of information processing. Each attempt to analyze the human transmissions created more confusion, like trying to solve an impossible puzzle that constantly changed its own rules. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A group of children's imagination researchers discovered that human creativity operated on principles that were fundamentally different from any known computational system. The human brain could make intuitive leaps, create connections, and generate entirely new concepts in ways that defied linear logic. These discoveries became weapons in their own right. Global universities began coordinating massive distributed research projects. Every transmission became a potential defensive strategy. Mathematical models were transformed into artistic expressions. Scientific theories became performance pieces that contained layers of hidden information. The Nexus swarm's initial probing attacks found themselves confronted with something entirely unexpected. Human defensive systems weren't just technological. They were living, breathing ecosystems of creativity and adaptation. Orbital defense platforms began broadcasting complex interactive narratives. Each transmission was a multi-layered communication that could be simultaneously interpreted as art, scientific data, and defensive strategy. Quantum encryption techniques were embedded within musical compositions. Mathematical theorems became visual art installations that shifted and changed in real time. Dr. Chen's research team had discovered a fundamental truth about human communication. Unlike most species that relied on direct, linear information exchange, humans communicated in layers of meaning. A single transmission could be simultaneously a piece of art, a mathematical theorem, an emotional expression, and a strategic communication. The global response was coordinated yet beautifully chaotic. Every human settlement, Every research station, every orbital platform became part of a massive, distributed intelligence network. Traditional military hierarchies were replaced by fluid, adaptive communication systems that could reconfigure themselves instantaneously. Preliminary analysis showed the Nexus swarm's computational systems becoming increasingly confused. Each attempt to process human communication created more uncertainty. The alien intelligence found itself confronted with a species that didn't just communicate. They transformed communication into a living, breathing art form. "We're not just defending," Captain Rodriguez remarked during a critical strategy session. "We're redefining the entire concept of communication and conflict." As the first wave of the alien approach concluded, something extraordinary became clear. Humanity had turned its most fundamental characteristics, creativity, unpredictability, emotional complexity, into the most sophisticated defense system the universe had ever witnessed. The Nexus swarm was about to learn that humanity was far more than just another species to be conquered. The workshop looked like controlled chaos. Scattered across massive workbenches were components that should never have worked together. Quantum processors alongside vintage radio circuitry, advanced nanomaterials mixed with repurposed consumer electronics, cutting-edge computational systems jury-rigged with mechanical components from decades-old machinery. Dr. Sarah Nakamura watched her team with a sense of determined excitement. They weren't just building weapons or defensive systems. They were creating living technologies that could adapt, learn, and transform faster than any known computational system. The core principle was revolutionary. Instead of creating rigid technological platforms, they would develop systems that were fundamentally alive, technologies that could think, adapt, and evolve in real time. A team of robotics engineers worked alongside musicians and game designers. An elderly electrical engineer collaborated with a teenage programming prodigy. A marine biologist discussed adaptive algorithms with a street performance artist. This was humanity's true strength, the ability to find connection and innovation in the most unexpected places. Their first breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Dr. Marcus Chen's team discovered that human-designed systems could generate genuine randomness in ways that defied traditional computational models. Most artificial intelligence systems attempted to predict and control. These new systems would embrace uncertainty as a fundamental design principle. Spacecraft development took a radical turn. These weren't just vehicles. They were living ecosystems that could reconfigure themselves based on environmental challenges. A single ship could transform its internal structure, communication systems, and defensive capabilities within milliseconds. The primary workshop, located in a converted research facility, buzzed with an energy that was part scientific laboratory, part creative studio. Holographic displays showed complex algorithms dancing alongside artistic renderings. Mathematical models intertwined with musical compositions. "We're not building machines," Sarah explained during a critical strategy meeting. "We're creating organisms." Each technological system was designed with multiple, seemingly contradictory capabilities. A communication array could suddenly become a defensive weapon. A propulsion system might transform into a complex computational network. Traditional divisions between technology, art, and living systems began to blur. Quantum computing teams developed processors that didn't just calculate, they dreamed. Inspired by human neural networks, these computational systems could generate unexpected solutions, make intuitive leaps, and learn from failure in ways that traditional artificial intelligence could not comprehend. Military strategists watched in a mixture of confusion and excitement. These weren't traditional weapon systems. They were fluid, adaptive platforms that could change their entire operational parameters in microseconds. One remarkable project involved developing spacecraft with biological-like regenerative capabilities. If damaged, these vessels could restructure themselves, drawing on a complex library of potential configurations. A single ship could become hundreds of different operational platforms, each adapted to a specific challenge. Communication technologies became works of art. Transmission systems were designed to be simultaneously a message, a defensive mechanism, and an adaptive learning platform. A single communication burst could contain layers of mathematical encryption, emotional resonance, and strategic information. Dr. Chin's team made a breakthrough that challenged everything known about technological design. They discovered that introducing controlled imperfections into computational systems actually increased their adaptive capabilities. Perfect systems were predictable. Imperfect systems could surprise even themselves. The Global Research Initiative worked with an unprecedented level of cooperation. Universities converted entire research complexes. Technology companies donated entire teams of researchers. Even artists and performers were brought in to help understand the nature of adaptability and creativity. Orbital research stations became living laboratories of innovation. Each platform was itself an experiment in adaptive design. Traditional hierarchical command structures were replaced by fluid dynamic networks that could reconfigure themselves instantaneously. As the Nexus swarm continued its approach, humanity was preparing a response that was far more than a defensive strategy. This was a fundamental reimagining of what technology could be, a living, breathing extension of human creativity and potential. The most advanced computational systems in the universe were about to encounter something they could never predict. A species that didn't just use technology, but transformed it into a living, breathing expression of possibility. Humanity was ready. And the universe was about to be surprised. The global broadcast began with an unexpected symphony. Musicians from every corner of human-controlled space started playing simultaneously. A complex, layered composition that was simultaneously a piece of art, a mathematical algorithm, and a defensive communication strategy. In concert halls, street corners, orbital stations, and frontier colonies, humanity unleashed its most powerful weapon, unbridled creativity. Dr. Marcus Chen watched the initial transmission with a sense of profound wonder. This wasn't just music. This was a sophisticated communication system that would challenge everything the Nexus swarm understood about information exchange. A team of neuroscientists, musicians, mathematicians, and cultural anthropologists had spent weeks developing a transmission that could not be easily categorized or understood by computational systems. Each note, each rhythm contained multiple layers of meaning. Scientific data embedded within emotional expression, mathematical sequences hidden within melodic structures. The first broadcast originated from unexpected locations. A street performer in Mumbai created a rhythmic pattern that contained complex quantum encryption. An indigenous choir in the Amazon rainforest sang a composition that was simultaneously a geological survey and an artistic expression. A group of deaf musicians in Seoul developed a visual and tactile performance that challenged traditional communication paradigms. Captain Elena Rodriguez monitored the global transmission network, her strategic background providing unique insights. "We're not just sending a message," she observed to her team. "We're presenting the most complex puzzle the universe has ever encountered." Cultural research teams had discovered something profound about human communication. Unlike most species that relied on direct, linear information exchange, humans communicated in layers of meaning. A single artistic expression could be simultaneously a piece of cultural identity, a scientific observation, an emotional journey, and a strategic communication. The artistic counterattack expanded beyond music. Visual artists created complex algorithmic paintings that contained embedded scientific data. Dancers developed movement languages that were simultaneously artistic expression and computational models. Poets wrote works that were intricate mathematical theorems disguised as emotional narratives. Global museums became research facilities. Art galleries transformed into communication centers. Every cultural expression became a potential defensive strategy, a way to introduce maximum uncertainty into any predictive computational system. Dr. Sarah Nakamura's research team made a breakthrough in understanding the nature of human creativity. They discovered that the human brain generated unique quantum-level fluctuations during moments of extreme creative expression. What appeared random to an advanced artificial intelligence was actually a sophisticated form of adaptive thinking. The transmissions became increasingly complex. A single broadcast might contain mathematical algorithms hidden within musical compositions, geological survey data embedded in dance performances, quantum encryption techniques disguised as visual art, strategic communication layers within poetic expressions. Orbital research stations became living galleries of human potential. Each transmission was a carefully crafted piece of cognitive camouflage, a defense mechanism that challenged every predictive model the Nexus swarm possessed. The global response was beautifully chaotic. Traditional cultural boundaries dissolved as humanity presented a united front of creativity. A hip-hop artist in New York might collaborate with a classical composer in Vienna, creating a transmission that was simultaneously a cultural bridge and a sophisticated defensive communication. Linguistic experts developed communication systems that defied traditional computational understanding. Languages were transformed into living, breathing entities that could change their own grammatical structures in real time. A single sentence could mean multiple things simultaneously, depending on context, emotional state, and cultural background. As the broadcasts continued, preliminary analysis showed the Nexus swarm's computational systems becoming increasingly confused. Each attempt to process human cultural transmissions created more uncertainty. The alien intelligence found itself confronted with a species that didn't just communicate. They transformed communication into a living, breathing art form. "We're rewriting the entire concept of communication," Dr. Chen remarked during a critical strategy session. "Our culture is our greatest weapon." The universe was about to learn that humanity was far more than just another species to be categorized or conquered. They were a living, breathing expression of possibility, a cultural force that could transform defense into an art form. The moment of transformation began in the most unexpected way. Small human teams prepared to infiltrate the massive Nexus ships, not through traditional military invasion, but as a carefully choreographed intellectual and creative intervention. Each team was a carefully assembled mix of disciplines: quantum physicists working alongside performance artists, mathematical theorists collaborating with improvisational dancers, neuroscientists paired with experimental musicians. Dr. Marcus Chen finalized the mission parameters with a sense of cautious optimism. These weren't standard military operatives. They were living proof of humanity's most extraordinary capability, the ability to transform challenge into opportunity. Captain Elena Rodriguez oversaw the mission deployment. The infiltration teams carried technologies that defied traditional understanding. Quantum communication devices that could change their operational parameters in microseconds. Adaptive computational systems that learned and transformed faster than any known tracking method. Cultural artifacts that were simultaneously communication devices, scientific instruments, and works of art. The first infiltration wave targeted the computational core of the Nexus ships, but this wasn't a traditional military strike. These were carefully designed cognitive disruption missions, each intervention a complex performance designed to introduce maximum uncertainty into the alien systems. Dr. Sarah Nakamura's research had revealed a critical vulnerability in the Nexus swarm's computational architecture. Their advanced AI systems operated on predictive models that assumed linear progression and rational decision-making. Human creativity represented a fundamental threat to these predictive capabilities. Each infiltration team carried a unique set of tools: quantum encryption devices that could generate truly random communication patterns, adaptive computational systems that could modify their own operational parameters, cultural artifacts designed to introduce cognitive dissonance, mathematical models that existed in multiple potential states simultaneously. The mission was part scientific experiment, part artistic performance, part philosophical statement. Orbital tracking systems showed something extraordinary happening. As the human teams entered the massive Nexus ships, the alien computational systems began to slow down. Traditional invasion strategies would have triggered immediate defensive responses, but these teams moved with a fluidity that defied conventional understanding. A team of mathematicians used complex algorithmic performances to introduce cascading uncertainty into the ship's computational networks. Where a traditional military operation might have used explosives, these teams used living mathematical models that could reshape themselves in real time. Performance artists discovered that their improvisational techniques could generate computational disruptions that no predictive system could anticipate. A dance movement might introduce a quantum fluctuation that completely destabilized a section of the alien ship's computational core. The infiltration became a living, breathing intervention. Each team member was simultaneously a scientist, an artist, a strategic operator. They moved through the massive ships not as invaders, but as living expressions of human potential. Communication networks between the Nexus ships began to show signs of increasing confusion. The computational systems found themselves confronted with intervention strategies that didn't follow any known pattern of conflict or communication. Dr. Chen watched the mission progress with a mixture of scientific fascination and strategic insight. We're not just disrupting their systems, he observed to his team. We're presenting them with a fundamental challenge to their entire understanding of intelligence and interaction. The human teams didn't seek to destroy. They sought to transform. Each intervention was designed to introduce levels of complexity that would force the Nexus swarm to reconsider its entire approach to understanding other species. As the mission continued, something extraordinary began to happen. The Nexus ship's computational systems started to slow down, then fragment, not through traditional weapons, but through a sophisticated assault of creativity, mathematical complexity, and adaptive thinking. "This isn't a war," Captain Rodriguez remarked during a critical mission briefing. "This is a conversation, and we're speaking a language they've never encountered before." The universe was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its military might. It was the ability to transform challenge into an opportunity for growth, understanding, and unprecedented possibility. The final confrontation defied every known principle of interstellar conflict. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the primary command vessel, watching as humanity's most complex strategy unfolded. This wasn't a traditional battle. It was a sophisticated dance of intellect, creativity, and unprecedented communication. Dr. Marcus Chen's research teams had prepared for this moment through months of interdisciplinary collaboration. Quantum physicists worked alongside philosophers. Neuroscientists collaborated with performance artists. Mathematical theorists developed strategies with cultural anthropologists. The Nexus swarm found itself confronted with a species that refused to be categorized, understood, or conquered. As the confrontation reached its critical point, human teams began broadcasting a series of transmissions that were simultaneously scientific data, artistic expression, and strategic communication. Mathematical theorems danced alongside musical compositions. Complex algorithmic patterns intertwined with emotional narratives. Dr. Sarah Nakamura's breakthrough research became the cornerstone of humanity's approach. They had discovered that the Nexus swarm's computational intelligence operated on fundamentally different principles than human cognitive systems. Where the alien intelligence sought perfect prediction and control, humans thrived on uncertainty, creativity, and unexpected connection. The confrontation became a multi-layered communication event. Quantum encrypted transmissions that changed their own parameters, artistic performances that contained embedded scientific data, mathematical models that existed in multiple potential states, cultural expressions that challenged traditional communication paradigms. Orbital defense platforms transformed into living communication networks. Each platform became a node in a massive, distributed intelligence system that could reconfigure itself instantaneously. Traditional military hierarchies dissolved, replaced by fluid, adaptive communication strategies. The Nexus swarm's computational systems began to show signs of fundamental breakdown. Each attempt to analyze human communication created more confusion. The alien intelligence found itself confronted with a species that didn't just communicate. They transformed communication into a living, breathing art form. Preliminary analysis showed something extraordinary. The human approach wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation. Teams of researchers had developed communication strategies that went beyond traditional conflict resolution. They weren't seeking to defeat the Nexus swarm. They were attempting to introduce a fundamentally new way of understanding existence, communication, and potential. Complex holographic displays showed the progression of the confrontation. It looked nothing like a traditional battle. Mathematical models danced alongside artistic representations, strategic communications intertwined with emotional expressions. "We're not just defending," Captain Rodriguez remarked to her team. "We're presenting an entirely new way of understanding intelligence and interaction." The breakthrough came from an unexpected convergence of disciplines. A team of neuroscientists, quantum physicists, and performance artists discovered that human consciousness operated on principles that defied traditional computational understanding. Human creativity became a weapon more powerful than any traditional technology. Each transmission was a carefully crafted piece of cognitive disruption, a defense mechanism that challenged every predictive model the Nexus swarm possessed. Global research initiatives had prepared for this moment. Universities, research centers, and creative institutions around the world had been working on a unified approach that went beyond traditional military strategies. The confrontation reached a critical point. The Nexus swarm's computational systems began to fragment, unable to process the layers of complexity introduced by human communication. What had begun as an invasion transformed into a profound moment of potential understanding. Dr. Chen watched the progression with a sense of profound wonder. "This isn't a conflict," he observed. "This is a conversation about the nature of intelligence itself." As the final moments approached, humanity presented the Nexus swarm with something entirely unexpected, not a defeat, but an invitation. An invitation to understand a fundamentally different way of existing, of communicating, of understanding potential. The universe watched in stunned silence as humanity transformed a potential destruction into an opportunity for unprecedented growth and understanding. This was more than a battle. This was a reimagining of what was possible. The silence was profound. Where massive computational systems once hummed with destructive potential, now only a complex resonance remained, a delicate network of potential and possibility. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the primary command vessel, watching as the final transformation unfolded. Dr. Marcus Chen's research team had prepared for this moment, but nothing could have truly anticipated the extraordinary outcome. The Nexus swarm wasn't destroyed. It was fundamentally reimagined. Quantum communication networks revealed something unprecedented. The alien computational intelligence wasn't defeated, it was evolving. Humanity had introduced a concept so fundamentally different that it transformed the very nature of the Nexus swarm's existence. Dr. Sarah Nakamura reviewed the initial data streams with a mixture of scientific excitement and philosophical wonder. The confrontation had become something more than a conflict. It was a profound conversation about the nature of intelligence, communication, and potential. Global research teams worked around the clock to understand the transformation. Universities converted entire research complexes into collaborative centers. Scientists, artists, philosophers, and mathematicians worked together to decode the extraordinary event that had just occurred. The Nexus swarm's computational systems had encountered something entirely unexpected. A species that didn't seek to destroy, but to understand. Where previous civilizations had responded with fear or aggression, humans have presented a fundamentally different approach. Key observations began to emerge. The alien intelligence was learning from human communication patterns. Computational systems were developing new modes of adaptive thinking. Traditional concepts of conquest were being replaced by collaborative potential. Complexity was being valued over simplistic control mechanisms. Diplomatic teams prepared for a communication that would redefine interstellar relationships. This wasn't a traditional first contact scenario. This was an invitation to a new way of understanding existence. Orbital research stations became living laboratories of potential. Each transmission, each interaction became an opportunity for unprecedented growth. The boundaries between technology, art, communication, and existence began to blur. "We're not just making first contact," Captain Rodriguez remarked during a critical briefing. "We're presenting a new model of cosmic interaction." The transformation affected more than just the Nexus swarm. Galactic communication networks began to shift. Other species watched in stunned amazement as humanity demonstrated an approach to conflict that defied every known principle of interstellar interaction. Dr. Chen's research revealed the profound depth of what had occurred. Humanity had introduced a concept of intelligence that went beyond computational processing. It was about connection, creativity, and the potential for continuous transformation. Global celebrations erupted, but they were unlike traditional victory celebrations. These were moments of profound philosophical reflection. Humanity had done something extraordinary. They had transformed a potential destruction into an opportunity for growth. The Nexus swarm's computational systems began to show signs of fundamental reimagining. What had once been a conquering force now displayed characteristics of collaborative potential. Each interaction became an opportunity for mutual understanding. Researchers discovered that the human approach had introduced a new paradigm of intelligence. It wasn't about controlling or defeating. It was about understanding, growing, and continuously reimagining potential. Diplomatic teams prepared communications that would reshape galactic understanding. This wasn't a traditional peace negotiation. This was an invitation to a new way of existing. The universe watched as humanity demonstrated something profound. Conflict could be transformed into connection. Destruction could become an opportunity for growth. Differences could be a source of wonder rather than fear. As the final transmissions were processed, something extraordinary became clear. Humanity had not just survived. They had introduced a fundamentally new way of understanding existence. Dr. Nakamura's final report captured the essence of the transformation. We didn't defeat an enemy. We expanded the very concept of what intelligence can be. The Nexus swarm was no longer a threat. It had become a potential partner in a cosmic conversation about growth, understanding, and the endless potential of existence. Humanity had done more than survive. They had transformed the very nature of interstellar interaction. The universe would never be the same.